Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Northshire Presents Online. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Person. I'm the events manager for Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs, New York. Here, as I so often am these days, with my good friend and colleague, David Wood, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Manchester Center, Vermont. He will be introducing our special guests in just a moment. But before we do that, a couple of very quick notes. First of all, as you're coming in this evening, you may see that this evening's presentation is being recorded for future broadcast on our YouTube channel. However, fear not, we have the settings arranged so that we are only recording those of us who are unmuted and speaking. So you will not be put on YouTube by us for perpetuity, so you can have your camera on if you wish. In light of that, please use the chat box for any questions that you have this evening. We will have time for audience questions at the end of the evening. So we will save those up. You can type them in, we'll save them up and pose them for you a little bit later on. And then last of all, before David starts with the introductions, a note of thanks to all of you for being here tonight and for your incredible loyalty and support of Northshire over the last couple of years, really. It's been tough times in the independent bookselling world, and we couldn't have made it through without you. We are deeply grateful to you for being here and for that support and loyalty. So thank you so much. And David, why don't you take it away and introduce our guests?
Thank you so much, Rachel. It is my great pleasure to welcome back to Northshire, Chris Bohjalian. Northshire Bookstore has hosted Chris for almost every book that he's released for the last 20-odd years, I think. And he joins us today for the paperback release of Hour of the Witch, one of the Washington Post's most notable works of fiction of 2021. Diana Gabaldon called Hour of the Witch historical fiction at its best. Chris is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 21 books, including The Red Lotus, Midwives, The Sandcastle Girls, and The Flight Attendant, which has been adapted as an HBO Max limited series. We're joined tonight specially by Joe Donahue. He is the Vice President of News and Programming for WAMC, best known for his continuing work as a talk show host and interviewer and his daily award-winning roundtable program. His guests have included 7 presidents, the Dalai Lama, Arthur Miller, Stephen King, Maya Angelou, just to name a few. Joe's been honored with over 50 national and local awards for his interviewing achievements. Please join me in welcoming to Northshire, Joe Donahue and Chris Bohjalian.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, and thank you, Rachel, and thank you to Northshire. I don't know for you, Chris, but Northshire has always been my bookstore home, and I know it's sort of, as David said, that was really where you have you've been there for a long time, for many, many years. That's a regular event.
First time I appeared at the Northshire was 1995 for Water Witches, my 4th novel.
4th novel. That's amazing. You have, just in the few moments that we were talking before we went on, I was stunned by you're very good with dates of your books and the releases. I don't know that I would be able to do that.
Oh, I can tell you the publication month and year for all 23 books.
Yeah, and now, is that the way your brain works, or is that important knowledge to have?
Oh, it is absolutely irrelevant. There's never going to be a Trivial Pursuit question. In what month was Chris Bohjalian's first novel published? Trust me, no one cares, and I wrote it.
No, let's see your first novel. You have your first novel right there, right?
I do. This is the single worst first novel ever published, bar none. A Killing in the Real World. It was published in August of 1989. And the only reason why it was published is because this was the era of Tamma Janowitz, Jay McInerney, and Bret Easton Ellis. You set a book in New York City and you have some cocaine and it's going to sell like hotcakes. Though actually this is the exception to the rule. It was published, but thank goodness it did not sell like hotcakes. It sold like whatever is the opposite of hotcakes.
Now, what was the impetus for the book, though? Were you fans of that genre, or were you a cokehead in the 80s? I don't know. I don't know how to ask that question.
You asked it perfectly. When I graduated from college, I didn't get an MFA. I went right to work, and I started work in New York City at an ad agency, and my wife was working at Shearson Lehman at the 104th floor of 2 World Trade. And every morning before work, from 5 to 7 a.m., I would write short stories. And these were very Scott Fitzgerald-esque short stories. And I would send them relentlessly to Harper's and the New Yorker and the Atlantic and be consistently and summarily rejected. And when I got rejection slip number 250, I thought to myself, plan A, not working. Time to try plan B. Now, at the time, Cosmopolitan was publishing a lot of short fiction. And so I rounded up 6 months worth of Cosmos, and I read them thoroughly to try to understand what constitutes a cosmopolitan short story. And then I wrote one. It's about a female supermodel who's married to a fabulously wealthy arbitrage trader. They live in a great loft in Lower Manhattan, but their marriage is a little bit dicey. So one weekend, she goes out to their equally cool beach house on Fire Island to see if the marriage can be saved, but instead spends the entire time playing scantily clad beach volleyball. Cosmopolitan bought it. First story I ever sold. And when agents read it, they approached me and they all said the same thing. Do you have a novel? And I didn't, because I'd been writing short stories. So I gave up the immediate gratification of the short story and spent the next year writing a novel. And because I was reading books like Bright Lights, Big City, I guess it was inevitable that for your first novel, you would try to write what you love and what works. And I tried and wrote a really bad, pale imitation of those books.
But it's still sold. You got it published, right? I mean, you did you immediately hate it, or has that come over the years when you compare it to more current work?
You know that moment that writers talk about when they pull the book out of the box? I pulled this book out of the box and thought, you really shouldn't have done this. I mean, everything about it felt as if it was a book you bought at Exxon or Citgo. I mean, nothing about this said, this is a book I'm going to get at the Northshire.
Right. That would come 4 books later.
Yeah, it would. Exactly right.
Yeah.
10,000 hours later. This is, this is an apprentice novel that probably should have remained in my desk drawer. But I will tell you one great irony. I didn't know a lot of writers because I'm at an ad agency in New York. Well, actually, I take it back. I knew a lot of writers who were really good writing about bathroom tissue and Listerine, but I didn't know a lot of novelists. But there was one other writer at this ad agency. He was the creative director, and he was really the only writer I knew, and he published 4 or 5 novels. So I went to him and asked him if he'd read the manuscript, please. And he did, and he blurbed it. And so the best part of A Killing in the Real World is that the blurb is from James Patterson.
James Patterson. Wow.
Creative director of J. Walter Thompson in the 1980s.
Very nice. And now, just because I'm curious, because I know another gentleman who worked with him who writes novels now is Marshall Karp. Did you know Marshall?
I didn't. Okay. James has mentored so many writers.
Yeah.
I can think of at least 2 other people from the ad agency who wrote novels with him. So it was, James Patterson and blank.
Right. Yeah, and that's what Marshall was. Yeah, that's fascinating. So let's talk about Hour of the Witch. The book is out in paperback. It's beautiful. It was beautiful in hardcover. It's beautiful in paperback. What brought you? There you go. As if on cue. I have to say, it's a beautiful book. So it came out. We just have to adjust our time because my time's all messed up with the pandemic. But so it comes out in 2021. So I'm assuming, knowing somewhat your habits, so the book was probably pretty much done by the time the pandemic hit. Is that safe to say?
That's 100% accurate. Yes. By March of 2020, Hour of the Witch was in its 4th or 5th draft. It might even have been sent to copy editing.
And is that a blessing in the sense of that you get it in under the wire?
I got nothing in under the wire. I wish I'd gotten it in under the wire. I got the book done, which was great.
Yeah.
But in terms of professional publishing, Hour of the Witch paperback is my 6th title that has been published since March of 2020, counting paperbacks, etc. My 21st novel, The Red Lotus, was published March 17th, 2020. We didn't cancel the 3-week book tour until Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020. I was getting the sweetest emails from booksellers in April who have been clawing to stay in business in the first month of the pandemic and completely reinvent themselves. And I get these emails from them saying, my God, I'm so sorry. I'm back in the store now. And I see we got in on Saturday, the 14th, your new book. We are going to unpack it. Congratulations, a month late.
Yeah. Well, that's right. So when you, I want to get back to the novel and of course what that means, but when so that book then came out in, you said the date, season.
It came out
Hour
May
of the
4th,
Witch came out.
2021.
Okay. So, and then the one before it. So yeah, that is, so you really get impacted then. Now, as far as
I did, but I mean, I think it's really important to make it really clear that as broken as I am, I mean, my voice is a permanent COVID casualty. But as broken as I am one of the lucky ones. I mean, today we acknowledge that 900,000 people have died. We're going to be at 1 million by the middle of April, and that's in the United States alone. And when you look at all of the markers for mental illness and depression, the last 2 years have been off the charts. So I am really blessed. I mean, I'm a novelist. So when, yes, The Red Lotus was commercially crushed, but my life, a large part of it didn't change. I'd get up in the morning, I'd walk my beloved dog, and I'd come into this room and I'd write. And that's what I was doing before the pandemic, and that's what I will do, when the pandemic is officially over.
So if you don't mind me asking this, when you say your voice is a COVID casualty, how did that happen?
I've had more diagnoses than there are coronavirus mutations. But the general feeling right now is that in March of 2020, lots of people around me got sick. I just had my first full-length play open. And so, every night in January and February, I was in a 250-seat theater. And I never got sick. But in March, I lost my voice. And it never, ever came back. And a lot of the research now shows that one of the long-haul COVID effects is something called dystonia, which I won't go into all of the neurological stuff because medical stuff bores me unless I'm using it to kill a character in a book. But anyway, this is a dystonic or phonesthenic voice. It works.
So
it works fine, but I just don't have the resonance that I once had.
Because like somebody like Diane Rehm, who was on radio, has spasmodic
Muscle tension dystonia. Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's wow. Yeah, that's like my biggest fear, Chris, is that I'll wake up with that and then I'll be out of a career. You can write.
Okay.
What am I going to do?
You're absolutely right. That's what I mean by I'm one of the lucky ones. When my current voice coach, who's fantastic, she's in New York City, and she looked at me at one point and she said, okay, I'm going to be Grim Reaper. Your dystonia, it's incurable. But I don't want you feeling sorry for yourself. It's not a big deal. I am not Grim Reaper to you as opera singer. If you are opera singer, you're completely screwed.
Yeah.
I've just destroyed your career. But you're a big ham. You've got interesting things to say. I've watched so many videos of you before COVID, after COVID, before March, after March, and you're a big ham. You could sound like Grandpa Simpson, and I'm going to listen to you.
Well, first of all, your voice coach sounds delightful.
She is.
Well, I'm glad, and as you say, you think of what you could have had and what could have happened, and yeah, that's not great, but it's better than a lot of the other options.
Yeah, I mean, I've got yeah, exactly.
So, I keep on like having this file card in my brain of I want to get ready to ask you about the book, and then I'm just thinking about so then during the actual pandemic, you're writing the book that will come out in May. Cue another prop.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this I really did get in under the wire. My lovely bride and I went on a safari to research this book in December of 2019. The Lioness is historical fiction. It's 1964 Hollywood. And Hollywood's biggest star finally gets married and brings her entire Hollywood entourage into the Serengeti on a honeymoon safari, where in the first chapter, they're abducted by Russian mercenaries. And it's clear that one by one, they're going to be eaten or killed. Imagine the Poisonwood Bible meets and then there were none. But I wrote this in 2020 and early 2021.
What was that process at all different for you? Because I mean, you're going through, I mean, obviously you're going through the voice issues, and the world is going through a pandemic, and I don't know, is that different for you?
Other than the voice issues, other than my despair at the state of the world, my life was not fundamentally different. I was still writing. I'd been to Africa. I could still reach out to the people I needed to interview. Now, it's possible that I might have done certain interviews in person that I did over Zoom or over the phone, but maybe not. Maybe those interviews would have been just an excuse to go places.
Right. So let us talk about the witch of what brought you to this particular time, this particular place, because we've established, and you're writing that book in what, 2017, 2018?
Yes.
And no political scholar here. However, I remember us starting to use the phrase witch hunt a lot in our conversations during that period of time. So what brought you to want to look at that time, and specifically domestic abuse and a lot of issues that we're still plagued with, of course.
I've been obsessed with Puritan theology since college. Imagine living in a world where Satan is as real as your neighbor, and you spend every moment wondering, am I saved or damned? It's an era that I think we all find really interesting, though we tend to go right to 1692 and Salem. So I was looking through the Boston's records for the Court of Assistants, just thinking about what is this novel going to be about? And I came across a 3-line reference in Boston's Court of Assistants to the divorce of Nanny Naylor from her husband on the grounds of cruelty. And I knew a lot about the Puritans, but I hadn't thought about them in the context of marriage. And so I went down this wonderful rabbit hole and learned that 31 times in the 17th century, Puritan couples divorced. There were 5 reasons why Puritans might divorce: adultery, cruelty, polygamy, cruelty, and wait for it, impotence. Of those 31 divorces, 29 were for adultery, cruelty, polygamy. One was for impotence, and that's a story in and of itself. And one, 1672, was for cruelty. And the idea in Puritan Boston of a woman standing before these 14 men in black robes and saying, this marriage cannot stand, that man is a beast, seemed to echo down 400 years. This was about the time of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And so I thought, there's your Puritan novel. A woman with 1 foot firmly in 1662 and 1 foot firmly in the 3rd decade of the 21st century. And that, of course, is Mary Deerfield. And while Caleb Adams, the magistrate who is so abusive and condescending to Mary in her first trial, is certainly based on Cotton Mather, he's also based on so many of the male US senators who wouldn't listen to Christine Blasey Ford during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, I could have called this book hashtag I believe her, circa 1662.
So this is a bit of a chicken and egg question, but is it the times that we live in that you hearken back that you're interested in exploring, or is it you find the topic and then it just sort of naturally seeps in, for want of a better term, of what is happening around us? So you're making those connections I assume you want your readers to make, or they're there for them to make those connections if they so desire.
It's a great question. Yes, first of all, in terms of the references and connections, when Magistrate Caleb Adams refers to Mary Deerfield as a nasty woman, I knew that it would echo and have resonance today. Now, right. In terms of the connections, I begin with a premise. Puritan woman divorces her husband. Alcoholic flight attendant wakes up next to a dead body far from home. Woman's boyfriend disappears on a bike tour in a foreign country, and it turns out to have something to do with some nefarious international espionage. And then I just feel what's in the zeitgeist. I mean, the best gift I've gotten as a novelist in the last decade, Vladimir Putin. Putin is the best thing that could happen to a storyteller because, you know, he's a James Bond villain. He literally poisons people with radioactive tea. You know, he surrounds post-Soviet nations with armies. He's got oligarchs all around him drinking $800 snifters of brandy.
And there are, well, not to be overtly political, but and then there are members of the current day Republican Party who are supporting him. As there were.
And sometimes they don't even know they're supporting him.
Right.
Sometimes they're just using the talking points because they pick them up on the social networks or through aides who may or may not have really close ties to Russia.
And as Hillary Clinton said and warned in the debates in 2016 of being a puppet and of all roads lead to Putin with Donald Trump. So it's hard not to make those connections. That's fascinating about Putin, and it, I mean, it seems like that villain isn't going anywhere for you.
No, but I should note, just so I'm not Russia bashing, I love Aeroflot. Whenever I go to Armenia, I fly Aeroflot.
Yeah. When was the last time you were in Armenia?
Just before the pandemic. It would have been the autumn of 2019.
Yeah. So in writing this novel, then, for you, what was that? You have the act, you have the history, and then you think. And then how do you extrapolate? What are the questions that you then set up that you're looking to answer and present to us to get us caring about these characters and caring about, well, justice, right?
Yeah, maybe. Certainly characters. Whether it's 1662 or 2022, the fundamental question I always ask is cause and effect. If this happens to this character, what will he or she logically do? Now, I don't care about good or bad decisions. I mean, sometimes readers say to me, oh, I don't like that book or that character because the character didn't make good decisions. But my God, there'd be no Sharp Objects, Secret History,
Yeah.
Anna Karenina, Macbeth. If we only had novels and plays and movies about characters making good decisions. But even a bad decision has to be grounded in that character's mindset. So when I was writing Hour of the Witch, when I was in Mary Deerfield's head, because every scene is from Mary's perspective. This is a third-person subjective novel. What must it have been like to be a young woman in Boston, a world in which God has dominion over people, people have dominion over animals, parents have dominion over children, and man has dominion over woman. If you wanted to be hanged in the 17th century, this was the trifecta, this was the formula. Be smart, opinionated, and female. Those are the people who were hanged. So whenever I was in Mary's head, she knows the tightrope she's walking. I set this book in 1662 because there was a witch outbreak in Hartford where 6 women were hanged. And so Boston was terrified that Satan was going to visit them next. This is a city that 6 years earlier, the governor of Massachusetts had had his own sister-in-law hanged as a witch. So when she has had enough of her abusive, horrific husband and says, this will not stand, she knew the stakes she was gambling were high.
Mary is the second wife of Thomas Deerfield, and the cruelty is unbelievable, and just harrowing, and it's ultimately, and I want you, I'm hoping you can show the fork. Yeah, now there's the 3-tine fork, which in the novel it goes in the back of Mary's hand. Yeah. So how did you come upon that?
I have a book, Everyday Life in Colonial New England, and it's a list of the estates of people who died. And I noticed, you see lots of knives and lots of spoons, but you don't see forks. And so when I did the cutlery deep dive, I learned that the 3-tined fork coming into use in France and the Netherlands wasn't used in New England because the 3-tined fork was too reminiscent of the devil's trident or the devil's tines. There was a lot of gossip when it turned out that John Winthrop, the ultimate Puritan worthy, when he died, had left in his estate 1 3-tined fork, but he would never use it publicly because of the perception. The thing about the Puritans is that we view them as really dour, and often they were, but their table manners were bacchanalian. Here's the reality. A, they're not using forks. B, they're drinking beer like it's spring break in Miami. C, they have plates, but they rarely use them. Instead, they use these mini pig's troughs called trenchers. And so they're eating with their hands and spoons and knives. And 4, they ate so much lobster. That was their baloney, because you'd walk into the back bay and grab a lobster. So you got these inebriated European immigrants eating out of pig's troughs without forks. and eating lobster. It's a party.
Hmm. You know, I mentioned I mentioned of the characters and looking for a justice, I think was the word I used, and but so much of one of the themes of your book is injustice, right? I mean, and
Yes.
from a female perspective, injustice from the female perspective. This certainly
No,
fits.
no one's ever put it that way, but that's spot on. Thank you.
But I mean, that is, and you come to that. I assume from one of horror of seeing it unfold in its many manifestations throughout our current, recent, and centuries old histories.
I think that's absolutely right. Literature doesn't have to be political, and not all of my books are political. I view Hour of the Witch as an historical thriller or just straight up historical fiction. But that doesn't mean that it can't try to illuminate an injustice. And that's why it was important to me that Mary Deerfield has one foot in the present. This is the second time I've written a book about domestic violence. The other is Secrets of Eden, set in Vermont, and that was February 2010. And arguably, The Guest Room is also about that, but a particular kind of violent, horrific human trafficking violence. 99% of the time against women.
When I want to talk, we have some questions, and I want to get to those in a few moments. What have you made of The Flight Attendant and its finding an audience on HBO?
Oh, I'm thrilled. First of all, Kaylee Cuoco is a brilliant actor and just a remarkable human being. And she was the one who made that happen. So all props to Kaylee. She was the one who 6 months before the book was published, read it and said, I have to play this flight attendant. Steve Yawkey, the showrunner, is really smart. And I just love the team that they've assembled. I enjoyed season 1 immensely, every moment of it. And I'm excited for season 2. They will wrap filming season 2 this coming week. And I think we can expect season 2 to begin airing in April.
So how much involvement do you want to have? Are you, I remember Robert B. Parker telling me a long time ago about Spencer for Hire. He said that was when he learned that the best thing to do is just take the money and run.
Robert's a smart man, was a smart man. I have had zero involvement with season 2 because that's based on my characters, but not the novel. Season 1, I had conversations early on with some of the team, mostly though about what are the changes that are necessary to make this work as a TV series and to give us the option for a second or even a third season. The thing about the novel is I don't want to discuss the ending because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it or seen the TV series. But there are 2 key things about the ending we changed between the book and season 1 so that there could be the possibility of a second season.
Did one of the things I think that book, that show showed me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because I love that book, and it was wonderful, but I have to say when I hope you don't take offense to this, but when I was watching the show, I thought, I don't remember the book being this funny. But there was sort of an ingrained humor in it, wasn't there, into the novel?
Yeah, I mean, the TV series is considerably funnier than the book because the book is, like a lot of my work, it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we talked about is that the book is very Alfred Hitchcockian. I mean, Cassie Bowden, my female functional alcoholic, is inspired by Cary Grant's Roger Thornhill in North by Northwest, a functional alcoholic ad exec of a certain era. So when they translated the book to the TV series, they were thinking very Alfred Hitchcock. And even at Alfred Hitchcock's darkest, there's an undercurrent of humor. I mean, there are scenes, there are, just asides, in Psycho that are very funny. Mother Isn't Herself Today.
Yes.
North by Northwest is a very funny, albeit thrilling movie. 1 minute, Cary Grant is diving for his life in a cornfield from a crop duster that's shooting at him. And the next, he's kissing Eva Marie Saint and the train goes into a tunnel. And that's the sensibility that Steve Yawkey and Suzanne McCormick and the geniuses at HBO Max and Warner brought to the book when they brought it to the screen. And we've got Kaylee Cuoco, who can be comedic gold. I think it's a great decision. And you see Kaylee's breadth as an actress in the first 6 minutes.
Right.
1 minute, she's getting a high five from a pickup while telling him, you need to go, I've got a flight to catch, and it's really funny. And 2.5 minutes later, she's sobbing uncontrollably in an airline van going to the airport as the police sirens are racing by.
It really is terrific, and as you said, to see the breadth. I don't mean to play armchair psychologist here, but is it? Am I just making this up, or does your brain go there that you deal with Hollywood and you sell a book that I assume you love, and you sell it to them, and then they take it and do what they want with it, and you have a good experience in the first season, but then I know that your next novel is about Hollywood in 1960s, and I assume you have an opportunity to explore some stuff there.
I do, and I have a great, yes. The Lioness is set in 1964, and it moves back and forth between the Serengeti and Hollywood. And it was the perfect book for me to write in the pandemic because it's historical fiction set in the past. And yes, I could have a great time writing about Hollywood people I've met, but setting them back literally 55, 60 years ago, so
Right.
they're unrecognizable.
But that's a whole other world, right? I mean, there's a reason you live in Vermont and not Hollywood.
It is, but I will tell you that, among the TV projects that may or may not ever happen, is Skeletons at the Feast with Lou Diamond Phillips, who's not just a great actor and humanitarian, he's a great director, and I've discovered a spectacular writer, whether it's his book, The Tinderbox, or his work as a screenwriter on Skeletons. I'm doing The Guest Room with Oscar winner Alex Dinelaris and Pulitzer Prize winner Martina Mayuk. And I love the process. I love the collaboration. And I love the fact that when Hollywood works, it's a committee building a thoroughbred racehorse, not a camel.
I remember Dennis Lehane telling me that one time about that after you spend so much of your life sitting in a room by yourself writing, that when you get to be collaborative, that it is very, Tom Perrotta said this to me too, that it can be very, very deep and very refreshing. And opens doors that you wouldn't have otherwise opened.
Among the most fun I've had in my life professionally was the 2 months before the pandemic, when I was in a theater almost every day working on Midwives with a brilliant director, David Saint, and a cast of Broadway and TV veterans. And P.S. my daughter, who I just love to work with.
Right. How did your daughter's an actress?
She is, yeah.
How
And
did
I mean, actually,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just saying, how did she manage through the pandemic?
Oh, she was gutted.
Yeah.
I mean, on Friday the 13th, March 2020, she was on her way to Penn Station to go to Boston for a 3-month contract as a lead. You know, she'd been working solidly for 2 years when the director called her and said, "We're shutting down."
Done.
She would not be on stage again for 16, 17 months. It was August 2021 when she was finally back on stage. She arrived this week to start a new show. And the goodie bags for the cast were delightful. They were filled with COVID test kits.
They used to give you earbuds. No, not now.
Yeah, that's right.
Now COVID test kits. Well, there you
Like
go.
a month of test kits.
Well, keep them all safe. I want to open this up to our audience and to the wonderful folks out there in watching us on Zoom. If you have not submitted a question yet, please do. You can put them in, just send them to chat, and I'll go through them. And did I miss anything, Chris? Is there anything you want to talk about before we go to the questions?
Joe, you're the best. I love chatting with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. I love how people often ask me about what makes a good author interview, and I said, well, you have to have an author that knows how to explain what it is they do, and you do that beautifully. And I thank you very much for sharing with us. Janine writes, my question for you, Chris Bohjalian, is how are you so good at writing female characters?
You know, I always begin with a universality. What links us as human beings versus what makes us different on the great spectrum of gender. And then I begin to layer in gender-specific idiosyncrasies. And the fact is, I've always been surrounded by really smart women. My lovely bride and I have been together since we were 18 years old. My daughter is way smarter than I am. Jenny Jackson, my editor at Penguin Random House, my gosh, she's been my editor since 2010 and always stops me before I kill again. She has a book coming up, I believe, her own, called Pineapple Street. Look forward, January of 2022. And my agents, I've often been women.
Is that, but often I would ask this question, but I don't think it's true in your case. But not, is that primarily your audience, your female audience, or do you think it's very mixed?
No, my audience is about 75% female, and that's because I write, literary fiction, because I do have a lot of female characters, and because I've never put a submarine in one of my books.
Well, an Oprah doesn't hurt, right?
Oh, yes, precisely. Yes. When your breakout book is an Oprah's book club selection and is called Midwives, yes, you're going to have a lot of female readers. Thank goodness.
Sure. We have a question from let's see. This is from Lexi, who has a question about the ending of this book, saying that it came as a bit of a surprise and a nail biter. Did you ever contemplate a different ending or endings?
Great question. I never know where my books are going when I start them. I depend on my characters to take me by the hand and lead me through the dark of the story. When I sense that the book is winding down, or I simply need to end it because no one wants to read a 500,000 word book by me, I usually get out 3 whiteboards and I use dry erase markers to plot the characters and all the possible endings. And then I go back to that thing we were talking about earlier. cause and effect. This whole book has been a cause. What's the effect on your protagonist, on your antagonist? And then I will think about, is this an ending that's going to really break my heart? Or is it an ending that's going to have me cheering? There can be nothing in between. In between is a 3-minute Olympic gymnastics routine, and you do not stick the landing. And I love books that break my heart. I love books that leave me gutted. And more of my books fall into that category than the happy ending category. Without revealing Hour of the Witch's ending, I had no idea whether Mary Deerfield would be breathing on the last page or not. I didn't even know that it was going to be 2 books in one book, the book of the wife and the book of the witch, until I was well into it.
Is it then when you write a novel that is gutting, that comes, like, that's not something that you can sit down and say, oh, I'm going to write a novel that guts me?
No, but I know that when I finish a book and I'm on the verge of tears or actively weeping, that's a cathartic experience. Or when I close a book and I'm laughing and thinking, like when closing a book and thinking to myself, that's perfect. And I'm happy. I'm thrilled as a reader. And when I start a book, I don't know where I'm going to be, but of my own. But I want to be at one side of the spectrum or the other. I mean, some of the authors who always seem to stick the landing for me, Megan Abbott, the turnout left me absolutely gutted and then pleasantly smiling to myself.
About endings, Emily writes and says, are there any endings you regret writing where you wish something hadn't happened?
Yes. I regret the ending of The Buffalo Soldier because it's almost too happy. And I changed the ending because I finished the book in May of 2001. And then 9/11 happened and we were all reeling. And I couldn't bear to see a book come out in March of 2002 with an ending that was going to leave people sad. So I changed the ending to make it more upbeat.
And then the question right before that is from Roberta, who says, I love Buffalo Soldier so much that I still think about the ending, and also really loved Midwives. So obviously it resonated with Roberta.
I'm glad. Thank you, Roberta.
Let's see. Courtney says, loved Sandcastle Girls. It brought the Armenian genocide to a larger audience. How does your heritage affect your writing?
Okay, I can definitely say that I discovered how important being an Armenian was to me at midlife. And that's why the Sandcastle Girls was published in 2012 when I was 50. Since then, a lot of my books have had a lot of Armenia in them. And sometimes they've had a taste of Armenia. Even The Lioness has a reference to both William Saroyan, Pulitzer Prize winning Armenian playwright, dramatist, and short story writer, and Dave Bagdasarian, his cousin, who gave us Alvin and the Chipmunks. Now, without wanting to put too fine a point on this, I am a grandson of 2 survivors of the Armenian genocide, the template for the Holocaust. I am fascinated by all of the studies of descendants of the Holocaust and the Armenian genocide and earlier genocides from the 20th century, and seeing the presence of depression and trauma, as if trauma can pass through DNA.
I have two specific questions about Hour of the Witch that I want to get to. One is from Laura, who says, I'm curious from your research, did you learn anything about men being accused of being witches during Puritan times?
Great question. Yes, men were accused of witches. And in fact, of the 19 residents of Salem and Danvers who were executed as witches in 1692, a couple were men, including Giles, who was pressed instead of hanged because they were hoping he would recant. But make no mistake, this was misogyny. This was witch hunts were run by men. They were not run by women. Women were not the jurists. Yes, in 1692, women were among the accusers. But by and large, if you look at our 1630 to 1692 history of witchcraft in North America, it was men executing women.
Another question about this novel, this one from Sherry, which is I think a great question, is about maintaining the period language of the time throughout the novel. Asking, like, do you find yourself speaking at times like that in your everyday life once you're in that world? And she comes to this from an interest in languages and linguistics.
I thank thee. Thou art most kind, and I am most grateful for thy faith in my work. I chose to go with 17th century dialect, very formal, because I wanted to keep one foot in 1662, knowing how contemporary Mary's sensibility was going to be. The other reason is because among my muses are Mary Oliver, Emily Dickinson, and North America's first immigrant poet, Anne Bradstreet. I said earlier that the Puritans weren't always dour. Anne is an example of that. Her poems are beautiful. They're about her despair at the death of a grandchild, her sadness when her library burned to the ground. Dost thou dream of things beyond the moon? Dost thou hope to dwell there soon?
That is, and it's beautiful, isn't it?
And Mary Deerfield's internal voice was inspired by Anne Bradstreet's poems and essays.
I'm curious that once you, is it hard then to leave that, or you always do something different? So then you say, okay, you're going to do something polar opposite. It's not going to be, I'm in this, I have this voice, this cadence in my head, I want to keep doing it on another project. It's, I have to go somewhere else.
Yes, you nailed it. So I went from candlelight in 1662 Boston to a gallerist and an agent standing on the Santa Monica freeway in a traffic jam, smoking Salem's because of the Beatles concert at Chavez Ravine. That was literally the first scene I wrote in The Lioness when I finished Hour of the Witch, an LA traffic jam in 1964 about the Beatles.
And so we have, there's one question that we got about your writing process. So I will ask, and that idea will inform this question. So what is it, the process of you wanting to be that specific, of writing about a traffic jam, writing about something that we all, many of us, most of us would associate with Los Angeles, and then also about, and then make it specific about the Beatles, which brings us to a very specific time and place?
It's okay, without wanting to put too fine a point on it, it's going down the rabbit hole. It's okay, what's going on in 1964? what's going on, and literally looking at the history, what's going on in 1964, what's going on in Los Angeles in 1964. What are the things we associate with Los Angeles, cause and effect? If there's a Beatles concert, was there likely to be a traffic jam? If so, what are they going to get out of their cars? Are they going to smoke?
That's great. Really fun. Well, I can't wait to read the new book. You'll be
Thank you.
at Northshire in person in May.
I will be at Northshire in person Saturday, May 20th, 6 p.m. Can't wait. And we don't know the details yet, but instead of t-shirts, I think this time we're going to have safari playing cards and a special Lake Champlain chocolates Lioness chocolate bar.
When did the merchandising start, Chris? When did that happen? That's great. Oh, I like the playing cards.
I've always given away t-shirts, and I just
Yeah,
decided this year I'm going to give away playing cards. They're fun. They're safari.
That's very, very fun. Well, I just want to, first of all, thank our hosts, Northshire Bookstore. There's just no finer bookstore in the world, and they're a wonderful independent bookstore in both Manchester Center, Vermont, and Saratoga Springs. If you have not picked up your copy of Hour of the Witch, you can do so by going to northshire.com and to get that. And you can also, of course, get the pre-order in for the new book Lioness when it comes out in May. Chris Bohjalian, you are such fun to talk to. I thank you so much for taking time out on a cold, frigid Saturday night and warming us all with the beauty of your language and your work and your storytelling abilities.
Joe, I cannot thank you enough. You are an icon. You're the best. I just love chatting with you and answering your questions. And I want to thank everyone at the Northshire. It is a great bookstore. Thank you all. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in on this Saturday night. You're the best.
Thank you very much, Chris. Be well. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you and good night.